When Guy, who's sitting here, when he was persuading me to be a speaker, this was a while ago, at the Cardiff Business Club, the technique he used was one to describe the previous speaking alumni. He thought this was a very powerful technique because he told me all about the great and the good. As you can imagine, as he added every grand name and every title, I shrank further and further back into my seat and thought, I can't possibly be here tonight and speaking to you. And I think it's a huge credit to the Cardiff Business Club and to all of you that actually you have made this a massively successful, which many aren't these days, sadly, group of business people who care about business, care about Cardiff and care about Wales, all of which happen to be passions of mine. I've come back to Wales. I'll talk a little bit, won't talk about much about my career, thankfully. I didn't want to anyway, but Gareth's done it all anyway. I've come back to Wales, as Gareth said, with my appointment to the Welsh Rugby Union 18 months ago, when Tim Griffin and I think Tim has already spoken here a while ago, and I were appointed as the first independent non-executives. Now, the big news was the WRU has appointed 2 independent non-executives. Normally, everybody has appointed the WRU since the year dot by being elected by the club. So this was the big news. Was this the news that was reported around the world? I think not. The news that was reported around the world, which reminded me, I was sitting in my desk in Washington, D.C., because I was still working at the time, reminded me that I was coming back to Welsh Rugby and the power of that. I was sitting at my desk and I got a text from a friend, an American friend of mine, and he said, Aileen, I've just read about your appointment in the New York Times. I'm like, wow. Then I got an email from a neighbour in New Zealand who said, I've just heard about your appointment because I've been sent a cutting from the Scotsman from a friend of mine. I'm like, wow. And then there was the BBC who said, we'd like to do some interviews, which is, I'll come on to talking about Mars as a private company. When you've even been a very senior person as I was, when you work for a private company, you run a mile when somebody says they're going to come and do a media interview. It's like, no, thank you. It's not the ethos of the business. So I did a live radio interview for the BBC, and then they asked me to do a TV interview, and they said, we'll film it beforehand because we're not sure when we can broadcast it, and we'll take some more footage and then we'll cut it down. So I said, no, fine. So I did my interview, and I was coached by my boss, who I was here tonight, so I'll be saying only good things about WRU. I'm not sure why he's sitting here, Gareth. I was coached by him in all matters strategic, what's the strategic purpose, and what's the agenda, and what's the governance mission. So I got all these questions, and I waxed lyrical about all this, having been well briefed about this. Very last question, what do your family think of the appointment? Perfectly valid question. And I said, well, they're very excited and proud. And I said, however, I did get a text from my cousin Heather, who said she hoped my first job would be to sort out the queue in the ladies' toilets. So anyway, I finished the interview. Off went the BBC to do their editing. And 3 or 4 days later, it came out on Wales Today, or whatever it was on, I can't remember. And you can imagine the end to this story. Gone was every strategic comment I'd made. And the only thing that was reported that I had a view on, the difference I wanted to make to the WRU, was the toilets. So there we are. And I have to say, I've made 0 progress so far, so hopefully they won't come back and interview me again from that point of view. I know you can all guess what's the question I get most often. What's it like to be the first woman on the Welsh board in 134 years? I'm the only one. I'm not quite sure what answer people expect. I'm always tempted to say, well, it's like being abducted by aliens or sold into the white slave trade, because it's a quite bizarre question. What's it like? I mean, the truth is, it's like any other new job. You've got to learn it, and you've got to prove yourself, and you've got to get to know people, and you've got to get people to respect you for who you are and not what you are. And actually, Tim and I, when we were appointed, we got a great welcome, actually much better than I had anticipated, which was a relief. But there was some scepticism, and I think, as we were the first independent executive directors, I think there were some people on the board who probably felt wrongly that they should take this as a criticism of their skills. And when I was doing my induction, I was still working in the US, so I was doing it on the phone. I was ringing up various board members just to get to know them and introduce myself. So I rang up one board member who shall remain nameless, and I introduced myself. And he said, launched straight into, he said, do you know, it's not the woman thing that I object to so much. He said, it's this business stuff. He said, we don't need that, we've got plenty of it. But the reality was, and those of you who don't have, and I'm not here to advocate for independent non-execs on boards, but of course, if you don't have people externally who bring in new perspective, then you don't know what you're missing. And of course, if you ask that individual now, they will be the first to admit, to say, actually, there's a very different perspective and skills that you can get by bringing in people. So that's what I get. So I got skepticism there. I get, well, you don't understand. That's always good when a sentence starts, you don't understand. You don't understand because this is sport and not big business. Actually, Gareth gets that too, and Martin. You don't understand, Aileen. This is sport, not big business. And I say, well, last time I looked, sport is big business. And last time I looked, the only way sport is going to succeed is to be well run. And what is business? It's about running things well and planning well for the future. And that's what a business is.